You are on assignment.
Now, a behind-the-scenes look. Hello and welcome to a very special edition of On Assignment as we look back on some of the great reporting we highlighted in 2012.
In this program, we will look again at some of the groundbreaking events that shaped the Middle East this year, an area of the world that is still undergoing enormous changes.
We'll also revisit North Korea, Afghanistan, and Africa.
It's a year-end review of some of the big stories VOA covered in 2012.
And all of it is worth a second look, so let's do it. The Syrian rebellion against the rule of President Bashar al-Assad has been painful and bloody. Early this year, Alex Pena reported on some Syrians who were aiding the rebellion not by direct fighting, but by providing the rebels with supplies and support.
We talked with Alex Pena in June after he had returned from Syria's border with Jordan. Let's look again at that segment, which begins with part of his report on Syrians supporting the uprising.
Overlooking Syria's southern border from Jordan, Ahmed al-Masri is making plans to cross it. He leads a group of Syrian smugglers who risk everything on a daily basis to bring supplies into the country. Ahmed Bas, who asked to remain anonymous, is arranging to smuggle more supplies north and people south.
Alex, can you help us understand what kind of smugglers are we talking about here? Because these guys are not smuggling weapons, they're trying to smuggle items of necessities. Can you please elaborate on that?
Right, they are closely linked with the Syrian rebels and the Free Syrian Army, but they're not supplying them weapons. They're supplying them anywhere from socks and t-shirts to satellite phones to laptops, pretty much anything logistically that people inside Syria may need that they can't get right now.
How did you get access to these guys?
Well, this group is very secretive and it's very underground, but because they're getting resources and they're getting supplies from the community, they have to have some sort of representative who is out in the community talking to people, and that's who Ahmed al-Masri is. His face is out there as a representative for this organization. So I met him through situations like that where I knew that they were gathering supplies, and then I sat down with him and I told him what I was interested in doing, and he let me into the group to kind of document what they do and how they essentially smuggle supplies through the border to the people of Syria.
From an undisclosed safe house on the Jordanian side of the border, Ahmed explains why they take the risk.
Everybody inside Syria need everything from outside. They need foods, they need medication, they need some communication machine like a satellite phone.
This doctor, who chose not to show his face, fled from Syria 2 months ago. Now he works with smugglers to supply doctors inside the country with life-saving tools and medicines.
So in this 3 small package, we put them in one big package and we smuggle it through the border.
For this doctor that you saw in the story, he came to the northern border of Jordan just 3 months ago. So his profession is really on the line here. And he wants to remain anonymous because in his eyes, he needs to be able to help them. And if his face and his name are revealed, basically there will be a crackdown and he can no longer work.
Everything for 3 small surgery and about 20 patients dressing is found in this bucket. And it is not heavy and it is easy to carry.
Why are these guys risking their lives to do this? I mean, what's the objective here?
Well, before they started smuggling, these aren't professional smugglers. In fact, some of them are engineers, doctors, restaurant owners, cab owners, but they were all in Syria and they were aiding the revolution or the uprising in their own unique way. Once they were kicked out of Syria or they fled, now they're dissidents living in Jordan. This is the only way that they feel that they can help the people that they left behind. So to him, it's a risk, but it's a necessary risk in order to help the engineers, doctors, the cab drivers, and the restaurant owners inside Syria who no longer have anything. They've been cut off from the rest of the world.
If I will scare and my friend is scared, nobody will do this thing. We must do it.
So Imran, we just talked about the story of Syrians who are fighting the government, but this year rebels have also gotten technical help from sympathizers living outside the country. We featured that story in September.
At great personal risk, that is, VOA's Rudy Bakhtiar crossed into Syria from Turkey and talked to 2 brothers helping the rebels in what they call a media war against the government.
So let's go ahead and rewind Rudy's talk with On Assignment's Philip Alexio, beginning with a look at her report.
It's a dangerous trek across the Turkish border into Syria. With the Turkish military patrolling one side Syrian forces and rebel fighters on the other, the risk of being caught up in the conflict is extremely high. But for 29-year-old Syrian Ayman al-Haddad, it's a risk he's willing to take.
I have to find any way to go to Syria and to make something for those people, for those who's Bashar al-Assad killed them. So I think that I cannot carry a gun, but I can bring some technology, some new technology, because we are not only in gun machine war, we are also in media war.
Well, now, how did you end up finding these guys? Is this something that was arranged, or something that maybe you stumbled upon?
This was, as you know, I went into Syria with a team from our Persian News Network, and we were not alone. We were with a team of other journalists who were crossing over into Latakia, a province of Syria, from the Turkish border. And it was basically getting dark when we all met close to the border, and we started our trek across the mountains and into Syria. And that's where I met Ayman, the older brother. He brought in BGAN technology, which is a way of connecting to the internet in mountaintops through satellite. So he brought one of those, he brought several cell phones, he brought ways to video, and a couple of computers. So every time he brings in a little bit of technology. But that's exactly what they mean when they say there's a media war. These images that you see when you're inside, that they show you, these are images that you don't see on networks such as CNN, because CNN isn't on the ground they're covering. One of the biggest targets for Assad's military are reporters, are actually citizen journalists who are basically using their iPhones to monitor what's going on or to show the fighting. The other thing that was important for them to get the stories out is how many kids are being killed.
Today, we must document everything in this revolution. Every baby had killed. Every woman had killed.
And these teams that are going in, they are just sort of makeshift units, right?
I think for me that was one of the most heartbreaking aspects to see.
Well, and frightening too, I suppose.
Is how young the members of the Free Syrian Army are, how inexperienced they are, how little ammunition they have, and the fact that there are these 17-year-old, 18-year-olds fighting with nothing but the skin on their back. And you're right, they're very inexperienced, and it's scary. You're putting your life in the hands of people who don't have that much experience. But what was evident is that there was definite resolve.
Rudy Bakhtiar, thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Fantastic.
And our thanks again to VOA's Rudy Bakhtiar, who spoke with On Assignment's Philip Alexio in September.
We're taking a break now, but when we come back, we'll revisit another trouble spot where VOA reporters have been this year, Afghanistan. You're watching On Assignment. In Afghanistan in June, Taliban militants stormed a hotel at the Karga Lake Resort near Kabul. At least 18 people died in the terrible 12-hour assault, which the Taliban said was punishment for drinking alcohol and other un-Islamic activities.
But the once popular resort did manage to make a comeback after the attack, although the threat of the Taliban still looms. Bethany, this was an extremely violent assault. At least 18 people killed over a span of 12 hours. The top U.S. commander in Afghanistan called it unspeakably brutal. And these images, as you say in your piece, they really are difficult to forget, these images.
Like many of the Taliban's high-profile sieges, the Karga Lake attack played out on TV. Viewers who witnessed it will never forget the images of people clinging to the wall of the Spajme restaurant at Karga Lake, as attackers on the terrace above carried out their killing spree.
It's very much a tough sight to shake. How has it affected people in the area?
I think a lot of people here are kind of used to attacks like that. In Karga itself, I think it's definitely taken away from their tourism industry. And people are still really scared. But like I said, people, and myself included, you're always kind of prepared for the next attack. And that's just the reality of life here.
The floor remains stained from pools of blood. The bullet holes have not yet been repaired. And areas bombed out by the attackers' hand grenades can still be seen. While the restaurant has returned to serving officials and middle to upper class Afghans, the number of guests is down by more than 50%. Asadullah is the restaurant's manager.
There are two kinds of people. There are those who have lived through 30 years of war. The attack has not affected these people. But the other people who have not lived through the war, they're scared.
The ones that haven't seen so much of the war, I think it affects them more so. The older ones that have been fighting for most of their lives, well, they're definitely used to.
Right, you talk about being prepared for the next attack. What is the threat level in the area now?
We don't know, and I think that is the scariest thing for Afghans, is that they don't know. You'll have a lot of people talk about like the Taliban times, or even, like during the Civil War and stuff, and that Afghans knew what was going to happen. Like you knew if you went outside that something could happen. But it's just getting increasingly insecure here, and part of the problem is that you just don't know. You don't know when and you don't know where. And Karga, I think, was the perfect example of that.
Nabi, a cook at one of the lakeside restaurants, was also working the night of the attack.
My family is happy I have a job and can go to work, but security-wise, of course, all Afghans are worried when someone in their family leaves the house.
While some Afghans do leave their home and risk a trip to Karga Lake, there are many others staying at home. It's another reminder that nearly 11 years after the U.S.-led invasion, security fears still overshadow much of Afghanistan's daily life.
And how difficult is it for you to get people to talk to you and to share their stories? Do they fear Taliban retaliation?
It depends where you're at. The north, you have U.S.-backed militia. They're called like the Afghan police and Arabaki and stuff like that. And they're also a huge threat to the people. So the people are really scared of them. And a lot of times they won't talk because they'll be tortured. In Kandahar, you have the Taliban. You also have ISAF, and you also have people like General Razik, who is also known, he's pretty much the government himself. So when you go places like Kandahar, yeah, I had an extremely difficult time getting people to talk there. If they're accused of, any association with the Taliban, then ISAF will go in. And if the Taliban think that they have any relation to ISAF, then the Taliban will get them. So really the civilians, they have it very, very hard.
We're taking another break now. On the other side, we'll hear about what life is really like in North Korea. You're watching On Assignment. North Korea began 2012 under new leadership following the death of Kim Jong-il in December of 2011.
His son, Kim Jong-un, took over as leader, and in April, North Korea allowed foreign journalists into the country for its massive celebration of the 100-year anniversary of its founding under Kim Il-sung.
VOA Korean Service reporter Sung-Moon Baek was one of those journalists who went to Pyongyang in April, and as he told us, he had rare access to ordinary North Koreans. Let's look at that report from May.
I am firmly resolved to swear my loyalty to our Supreme Commander, Kim Jong-un, throughout my entire life.
What about those interviews that you took? They're pretty fascinating interviews. How controlled were the interviews?
I was relatively freely approached to the people.
It is not only soldiers who pledge allegiance to the young leader. Ordinary citizens laud him as a confident leader.
I was really surprised when I first saw him. Before, I could only see him on TV or newspaper. I was totally overwhelmed with joy, and I was so relieved to have him as a leader.
I was one of the very few foreign journalists who spoke their language, Korean language, of course. So I was more kind of being paid attention by the officials there. So whenever I wanted to or try to talk to people, not only my minders, but also other minders were accompanied by.
The hailed, but ultimately failed missile launch, which North Korea hoped would be a show of mighty military force, opened up a few cracks for outsiders to peer into the inner workings of North Korean society.
The specific question was, how do they think about their missile launching? But the very young lady started talking about this is not a missile, but a satellite, and it is a peaceful purpose, which sounded a bit unnatural, and more importantly, she constantly kept peeking into her note.
This young lady struggled to follow instructions when asked about the controversial launch.
So are you aware of criticism that the launch is a cover for a test of long-range missile technology?
Yes, I heard so, but it's wrong.
How did you learn about the criticism?
Well, our satellite is not a long-range missile. It's a peaceful satellite observing the Earth.
The interesting thing is that if it's an ordinary citizen or the officials, their answer was extremely the same.
I heard a couple of people say that they're pretty optimistic about the future in terms of economic development. In the past, we have a record that the past leaderships couldn't pull it off. So why do the people still have the sense that the economic condition of North Korea will get better?
Many North Koreans believe it is Kim Jong-un who makes it possible for North Korea to achieve prosperity in economy, military prowess, and the advancement of science and technology. One even told VOA that apple trees bear fruit thanks to the exceptional leadership of Kim Jong-un.
Who in the leadership would look after this little farm? Kim Jong-un is such an exceptional leader who takes care of his people.
What was that about? Was that about was that a depiction of the overall economy of North Korea, that now we have a new leadership so the apple trees will start bearing fruit? Or was that just her particular example?
That apple tree comment was not just metaphor. It was kind of symbolic reaction of North Korean people. They especially put an emphasis on the on-site guidance of the leaders. That means that the leaders visit the specific farms or factories or any production the facilities. They believe that all the problems would be solved. That's their mindset. At least they say that it is.
Okay. Well, great job. Love the story. Thank you so much for your time, and good luck to your future projects.
Since leaving office, former U.S. President George W. Bush has been quietly building on his success fighting AIDS in Africa. In mid-2012, Mr. Bush and former First Lady Laura Bush spent a week in Africa to promote cervical cancer treatment programs for women, many of whom are living with HIV.
VOA's Brian Patton went to the continent with Mr. Bush and got a behind-the-scenes look at the trip. He spoke about that with On Assignment's Rebecca Ward. Let's go back in time, rewind the tape for another look at this story, a footnote to the Bush presidency.
Worst epidemics of modern times, the spread of HIV.
During his presidency, he passed a bipartisan bill that funded billions of dollars for antiretroviral drugs for people with HIV and AIDS in Africa. He is credited with saving millions of lives. So in Zambia, he came to promote his current cause, which is preventing cervical cancer. One of the things he talks about is that they have saved so many lives with the anti-AIDS drugs, and yet people now are getting exposed and can die from other causes like cervical cancer, which are also easily curable. So he is using success from the past to promote this cause.
We believe that to whom much is given, much is required.
Through his George W. Bush Center and other partner organizations, the former president has raised more than $85 million for cervical cancer programs. He says his goal is to build upon one of the great bipartisan achievements of his presidency, his 2003 AIDS initiative that initially funded $15 billion worth of antiretroviral drugs and treatment to extend the lives of millions of Africans with HIV and AIDS. Zambia now has the second highest number of cervical cancer cases in the world, in part because many of the women infected with the disease are also living with HIV and have weakened immune systems.
President Bill Clinton and President Bush's father, George H.W. Bush, as well as Jimmy Carter, well known for his humanitarian work. Do you think that part of this, though, is to kind of, as far as any president, probably polish up their legacy?
To rehabilitate his image. He left office with a very unpopular rating. He is not a beloved figure right now within his own party. Is this a move to kind of refurbish his image, to remind people of the success during his presidency? I cannot say. He did, I will say this, he seemed genuinely involved in this, genuinely wanting to do good work and for beyond reasons that would be political.
And you actually, in your report, you show him painting the clinic, talking about quiet service. So give me a little sense of what it was like, the president there actually working on the clinic.
Let me tell you this, he was an extremely likable man, and he seemed in his post-presidency like a man who's extremely content.
Well, tell me about how the people that he met at the clinic and on the streets in the village, how did they receive the president?
Like I said, he's a very funny guy, and people just laughed. He would come up and make the stupidest jokes. There was a point where there were a lot of local women waiting for some ceremony to begin, and his wife, Laura Bush, was over talking to the women. And he came strolling over, and he would say, "Hello, ladies. My name's George. This is my wife, Laura." Everybody just cracked up. "We know who you are, Mr. President." It's very funny. Just that kind of sense of humor got along well with the people.
What about you? How did you feel being there? You were the sole reporter at one point.
At one point, yes. He was there for about a week, and for the most part, he was, the press were not allowed in the area where he was at. So the second day where we were allowed access to him, I was invited by his people to come with him while he visited an orphanage where many of the children are alive today because of his AIDS initiative, because many of the children there were born with HIV. So it was a very touching visit. He was very, very affected by it, seeing these children, seeing how they're alive today. You could see at one time he teared up. He had to wipe a tear from his eyes. Other times he was just very gracious and had a lot of time for the people, just to talk to them and chat with them.
You also mentioned something in your report that he has a namesake now in Africa.
That's right, that's right. There was a child born at next to the health clinic where he was building, where they named the child George, and he seemed amused by that, to be honest. And he, at one point, walked over and said, "I gotta go now. I gotta go see a baby named George, named after me." And then when we went to an orphanage, there was another little baby named George. And so he was getting a kick out of that.
And you were just watching VOA's Brian Patton and our very own Rebecca Ward. With that, we've come to the end of our show. Thank you so much for joining us.
And as we say goodbye to 2012 and hello to next year, we hope that you will join us again in 2013. I'm Imran Siddiqui.
And I'm Alex Villarreal. We'll see you next time, next year.